Hello, everyone, and welcome to a better late than never edition of ARG Presents. I'm your good buddy, your good pal, Amigo Aaron, and you may see, if you're watching at home, curious by his absence, it's the Brent. We have had a rough time the last couple weeks getting this show in the can because, unfortunately, Brent had a death in the family, followed by another health issue in the family. Not Brent, not his wife or kids, but just someone in their non immediate family that has caused Brent to have to really reshuffle a good chunk of his life. And amongst the things he's had to do is take a sabbatical from this particular show and the remaining retro rotation shows. I think this is only temporary, and the Brent should be back and feeling frosty by the beginning of the year. But I'm going to take on the load of the remaining shows for the rest of the year, and hopefully we'll get him in for at least a couple before it's all said and done. And I know he's really wanting to do the marathon show on the day after Thanksgiving. Thanks for giving. We'll see how it goes, but nevertheless, we're not gonna let that slow us down. The one thing Britt told me is keep the ball rolling, brother, and keep it rolling. We're going to do, and hopefully we'll have the Brent come back around whenever he's able. But I'm sure at the beginning of the year, hopefully, he'll be back to 100%. With all that said, several weeks ago we spun the wheel. We made the deal. And the deal was to play games you can beat on one credit or on one quarter if you're in the U.S. A daunting task. And what we're going to do this week, and I do have some clips from Brent that he sent in for his opinions on these games since he picked one of them. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about games that came out the same year as the game we're talking about, since these are both arcade games. And I thought it might be kind of fun to look over some of the games that came out the same year as the games we're looking at. So, the first game, this is the game Brent picked this week, came out in the glorious, glorious year of 1982. Gosh, this is when video games was really coming into their own. I thought I'd go through some of these, just to kind of mention some of my other ones, my personal favorites, and I'd love to hear your favorites from this year. I mean, good Lord, there's no way I'm going to go through 100 games in 82, but there are so many good ones that I thought I would go ahead and just name a few off, and some sleepers that no one really talks about. For example, I was a big fan of Anteater, the quirky game where you stick your tongue down into the ant hill. It was sort of a Pac-Man clone with a twist. I really enjoyed that one when it came out. Another one that I really, really enjoyed, although I sucked at it, was Bagman. I played a lot more of this one on the home, like clones, than I did in the arcade, but I did see an arcade version of this every once in a blue moon. Another one of my favorites was Bump and Jump. I love that game. I remember the first time I saw it at a grocery store in Charleston. I was just couldn't believe it. I was like, man, this is great, and it's one of the mini games that I thought to myself, look at the graphics. It looks like a car and everything. It's supposed to just dot. You know, you sort of aging yourself when you when you get on that road. You know, in '82, I would have been 11 years old, so I was in my prime gaming days. And one of the big games that came out that year was Donkey Kong Jr. I really loved the first Donkey Kong. I remember playing this one we used to have a department store called Murphy's Mart. That was in a town called Dunbar, West Virginia. And my mom and my babysitter used to shop there all the time, and they'd stick me in the arcade area. They'd have 4 or 5 games back there. And Donkey Kong was one of the staples, along with Dig Dug, which also came out that year. And Asteroids was also one that was always there. That one obviously came out earlier, but that's one I remember. And so then it was trying to wrangle up some quarters. And usually I'd waste all my quarters and then stand beside the arcade machines looking pathetic, hoping some stranger would take pity on me. It's funny to think about that now, because it's not a good thing. But that's exactly what. And I wasn't the only one. Of course, you also had to check the little change returns. Hopefully, you get lucky. Here's a game that came out almost. I mean, it was almost at the exact same time as the game we're talking about today, and that was Jungle Hunt or Jungle King, depending on what you found. I played this one at a little convenience store, also in Charleston. It was near where my grandmother lived, and I was like, "Man, this is great!" It made the Tarzan yell a real fun game that I played a ton of back in the day. I thought it was a real fun. It's still one of my favorites today, along with Kangaroo, which also came out the same year. It's another fun one. That's one people don't talk about much anymore, but I always thought it was pretty clever game for back in the day. Listen, one of my all-time favorite games, Mr. Do. I love Mr. Do from Universal. It was out in '82. Tremendous game, a lot of fun. People kind of dismissed it as a Dig Dug ripoff, but it really doesn't play like Dig Dug at all. Something else I want to talk about is Baby Pac-Man. This was the pinball machine video game hybrid. It's funny because I've got Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, the pinball machine video game hybrid of pinball, and it actually works better where they put the play field from Pac-Man in the middle of the pinball field, and you're actually earning moves to move your Pac-Man along in that field. And in this game, Baby Pac-Man, it's sort of similar. You're earning energizers to go through the level. The problem with Baby Pac-Man was the pinball machine wasn't good, and they made the video game portion just as generic as they could, and that's a bad combination. Popeye and Pooh-Yan and Pole Position, all the P's, they're all outstanding games. I love, and we've covered some of these on the show. One that Brent loves that I see on the list is Portman. He played the crap out of that back in the day. Satan's Hollow, another game we've covered on this show. I'm a big fan of that one. I mean, it had Satan in it. It was affiliated with Satan. Pretty cool. You also had Cubert come out this year, which is another great game and very clever from Gottlieb. It had the pinball knocker in it. We maybe even covered that one on the show. And then you get into your supers. You had Super Pac-Man, which is far and away my favorite Pac-Man. Super Zaxxon. It's funny, I didn't really think much about Super Zaxxon until I played the home version of it. I believe it was on the Atom. It might have been the MSX, but man, it was really good. I really enjoyed playing it. And rounding out my favorites from that year, you've got Time Pilot, which we covered on the show, along with its wacky sequel, Time Pilot 84, which we covered on the Games Pixel Gaiden Got Wrong episode. Time Pilot really was a great game. I got to play that one over the summer back on the original cabinet. And that's one that really, I love playing on the original cabinet because the stick just seems to work so much better. And lastly, the last one I'm going to talk about, and this has got to be one of my all-time favorite arcade games, it's the Zookeeper. I love that game, and when they thought about making games that were about point pressing, that was the one that they put at the head of the pack, because that's what you do in that game, is that you point press the heck out of it. So, since we're talking about 1982, let's go ahead and talk about the Brent's pick. I'm going to pretend to be the Brent for just a little while, since he was involved in the picking of this one, and I'll be honest with you, when it comes to games you can beat on one credit or one quarter, Brent's quite a hand in the arcade. But I think some of the games that he could have put on this list we've already played, like fighting games and whatnot. So, but I mean, he could have picked a better game as far as I'm concerned, because the game he ended up picking was Moon Patrol. Moon Patrol, of course, again released in all over the world in '82 and developed by IRM. You know, IRM doesn't get much credit, but they released so many good games and tons of console games. But just to run through some of their heavy hitters in the arcade, 10-Yard Fight, the game Motor Race USA, which had about 30 different names, Kung Fu Master, Kid Nicky, R-Type, Vigilante, Dragon Breed, Boat's favorite, Hook. And, of course, everyone's favorite, one of their last releases, Ninja Baseball Batman, which is crazy, insane, bonkers. This thing, in America, I believe Williams Electronics were the ones that actually put this out in the arcades. So, get this, designed by Takashi Nishiyama. So, this guy was all man. if you'll allow me to go through some of his awesome games he designed, aside from Moon Patrol, were Kung Fu Master, which is an all-time classic, Section Z, and Trojan, one of my brother's faves. And then Takashi also directed Legendary Wings, Avengers, the very first Street Fighter, Last Duel, which is a game we actually owned the board for a while, the original Fatal Fury, Ghost Pilots, and then he was also producer of Mega Man, tons and tons of the King of Fighters, tons of the Fatal Furies, tons of Metal Slugs. He also was credited for producing Soul Calibur 6. This guy has done a ton of great work. An outstanding designer, director, and producer. The music and sound effects on this were done by Ishiro Takagi. He has a smaller list, but he was responsible for the audio in 10-Yard Fight on the NES. He actually designed Tube Panic and did the sound effects and music, which I've never played Tube Panic. And he also did the very catchy tune for Motor Race USA. Of course, Moon Patrol, I mean, when you consider your all-time classic video games, Moon Patrol's there. And, of course, when you've got that kind of jack, you get dumped everywhere. Not going to go through every one of these, but just to name a few places where there was an official port. The VIC-20, the Sword M5, of course, 26 and 5200s, the MSX, TI, C64. There was a PC booter version of this. I got to go look that up. And then your Apple, your Atari 8-bits, your ST. Yes, your ST got an original release this one. Maybe that will pop up on the Atari ST show. And then rounding it out, this was actually released in compilations on the PS4 and the Switch from back in the day. So, what are we talking about here with Moon Patrol? Moon Patrol is a real interesting game. You are, according to the instructions to this game, you are basically a police officer in Luna City, assigned to Sector 9, home of the toughest thugs in the galaxy. It's funny because I've never read that anywhere, but I saw that exact quote in so many websites. So I'm guessing maybe it was on the. Sometimes when you buy arcade boards, they'll have extra bonus background info, like at the instruction manual or something. So I don't know where that originated. Maybe it could be from the Atari 2600. Nevertheless, you control a moon buggy that travels to the right and goes across the screen in a horizontal setting across the moon. Now, there were a lot of firsts in Moon Patrol because when you first fire it up, it's a striking game. And the first thing that will catch your eye is the various scrolling backgrounds. You've got multiplanar scrolling here. This was this is often credited with having been the very first game to have that ability, that did multi-scrolling. I've heard some people waver on that, but I mean, it's got to be amongst the first. And I'd probably the very first to do it very well. Now, we mentioned earlier that Jungle Hunt from Data East, we mentioned it came out the same year. In fact, it came out just a month or two after this, and it also had that sort of scrolling. So it wasn't too long in the kitty before it came around, but this is credit with being the first. Something else this has is quite interesting. It's been credited with one of the first games that will continue to keep your high score, which is nice. So you also have crediting on this as one of the first games, if not the first, that will let you continue where you left off with a quarter, depending on the dip switch settings and whatnot. I always hated that, if I'm honest, but there you go. So what are you doing in this game? Well, you're going across the surface of the moon, and you're trying to get from A to Z. There are checkpoints along the way, and these checkpoints indicate different sections. So, for example, if I was in section J and was killed, I would return to the beginning of section J basically and go from there that way. So it's sort of like almost like an in-game save, I guess. Your moon buggy has the ability to shoot forward and shoot straight up in the air and has the ability to bounce. Of course, the moon has a lower gravity. If you ever watched the old astronaut videos where they drove the moon buggy around, I'm sure that's where they got the idea for this thing. It was bouncing around all the craters and stuff. It looked like a load of fun. I always thought that would be great to do. This is a 6-wheeled vehicle, and it can go. You can control using the joystick. You can speed it up or slow it down, depending on how far to the left or to the right you have the joystick. And when you're jumping in the air, you can sort of like, you've got some maneuverability there as well, to try to do the best you can. But when you're shooting, you're just basically, you're not aiming. It just shoots straight up above you. And so whatever part of your jump arc or whatever you've got, that's where it's going to shoot. Now, you think to yourself, this doesn't seem too bad. Well, of course, you're going to be confronted with obstacles along the way. The game does a good job of slowly giving you the tough obstacles. So at first, in course A through E, your first goal is just to learn how to use the vehicle. You'll shoot rocks with the gun. You will jump over craters, and you will also shoot UFOs that are attacking from above. You've got a couple types of UFOs, and one specifically difficult type to deal with. So you've got a sort of a yellowish with a blue center UFO that will come down, and all they do are drop basically like missiles down. You've got another type of UFO that does the same thing, and then you've got this sort of 3 circular, 3 balls that are connected with a stick-looking UFOs that they drop little bombs that when they hit, they cause new craters to form that you have to jump. So these literally change the playfield while you're playing, which I don't know how many games had done that up to this point. I mean, it's quite remarkable that they pulled that off. And it does add a lot of spice to the game as you get into the later levels. That it can get quite spicy. But A through E, pretty much all it does is sort of break you in. Now, sometimes you'll have rocks that are double rocks that you have to shoot to get through. Sometimes you get real tiny rocks that are real difficult to shoot because they're sort of under your gun's shooting arc. And sometimes you get double holes, and sometimes a combination of the two. So you're learning to control your jumps, and that'll be vital as you get to the game. Now, once you get past there, the game ramps it up a little bit more with more of the bombing ships that crater up the ground and more advanced jumping. But really, it gets real when you hit F. Checkpoint F is where you begin to encounter the mines, the land mines. Land mines are just literally little flashing rectangles on the ground that you have to jump. You have no choice. And so when you intermingle land mines with rocks and craters and attacking ships, it can be a real bummer to get through that one. Once you get all the way from F to J, then you hit level P, and this is where you're introduced with going uphill, and you're confronting boulders, and boulders come out, and you have to you can shoot them or you can jump them, but you're going uphill. It sort of reminds me of the level. There's a level in Jungle King where you're going uphill and there are boulders bouncing down on you and you have to sort of do something with them. These don't bounce, but you have to jump them or shoot them. And then finally, as you near the end of the course, you're going to be confronted with tanks. Tanks are just what they sound like. They shoot you. They're standing there. You can shoot them, but you have to avoid their shots. Again, towards the end of the game levels, they will start giving you all this stuff at the same time. And it becomes a real hassle. Now, once you get through the beginner course, and I should mention, you are after every, I believe it's after from A to D, and then F to J. So, but every so often, everything's like every 4 levels, you are scored, and you have a time to beat, like the best time that's saved. And if you beat that time, you'll get a bonus, and you can even beat the track record. Which is always nice to pull off. So once you've went all the way through the game and you finish the game, you will begin looping back through the game on the what are called the championship courses. Championship courses are basically more of everything I mentioned, but you also get a few extra actions. For one thing, you get the jerk car. I've always called it. It's just sort of a hot rod rocket car that comes in behind you and just hovers around behind you. It gets behind you and waits, and finally, eventually, it just takes off, and you have to jump. Oh, you have to jump over it while it goes under you. It's a real. It's pretty cool. I don't know who this guy is, but always in my mind, it's like a local teen hot rodders. They're just jerks. You're also going to have. You're going to find that as you get to the later levels, the rock formations are going to get more difficult. And you're also going to have to watch out for these sort of weird, like, plant creatures that are growing inside of the craters, because they will also jump up and get you. Of course, this game, when it was released, it was wildly popular. Moon Patrol was amongst the top 5 grossing arcade games as they were printed in North America's replay charts in January of '83. It was given multiple awards, including one of my all-time favorite, the Certificate of Merit this was in 1984. It was given the Certificate of Merit for the best science fiction fantasy video game at the 5th annual ARG Awards. So once again, anytime you get praise from the ARGs, by God, you've done something. You also there's an outfit called 42 Arcade Express, which I believe that's the 42nd edition of Arcade Express, reviewed this game and gave it an 8 out of 10. So it was popular amongst those. A few other reviews that this received. Eurogamer gave this 80%. All Gamers Guide 80%, and Arcade Express gave it, as I mentioned, an 8 out of 10. Not too bad. High praise. How would I praise this game? Highly. Brent did good here. There was a time where I could scoot right through a couple of levels of this without thinking twice. But that time has passed. I'm not as good at it as I once was. But the truth of the matter is I'm still pretty good. And the one thing this game had going for it has more than one thing. So obviously, when they put this together, you really had a one of those moments that happen in an arcade game where it all comes together. Take a great concept, driving a moon buggy across the lunar landscape. The concept's great. It's original. Then add that to incredible graphics with all the and the levels change. You know, sometimes there's a cityscape, but having the different layers of graphics, it really works. It's quite nice. I mean, these graphics aren't what I would call, world class, but the effects that you get make it better. It makes it look better. And then finally, and I've got to mention it, the music in this is quite classic. When you hear it, you know it, and it does stick in your head. And it does sort of, to me, it never has gotten monotonous. It's just one of those themes that you can hear over and over, and you will hear it in this game repetitively. But Takagi really nailed this theme song, and really the sound effects as well are quite well done on this one. So it's one that I always have enjoyed over the years. It's funny. When I was looking at some of the information on this game. One of the articles mentioned the many bootlegs of this game, and it is one of those games that was heavily cloned, including on the Coco game. There were multiple Moon Patrol ripoffs, like Lunar Rover was one, and they've got listed here Desert Patrol. If you have an A2600, there was a game called Gas Hog. There was Lunar Rover Patrol on the Dragon, which also made its way over the Coco. Moon Buggy on the C64, Moon Alert on the ZX, Lunar Rover on the ZX, Moon Control on the Amstrad, Moon Rider on the MSX, and Overlander on the Amiga. This is a game that you could easily update, and you could. There's plenty of play left in this game. Plenty of juice in the tank for Moon Patrol, because I think there are tons and tons of things that weren't ever tapped on this one. A couple of things I found out just nosing around that I thought were interesting. There was an official Spectrum version of this game that not only was it publicized, but it was actually reviewed in Crash Magazine, and it got a great review, but it was never released. And so apparently it's around, but one would wonder, why that? Because I have no doubt that the Spectrum could pull a game like this off. It's surprising to me that this never got a release. So as I mentioned, this was Brent's choice, and so let's hear from the man himself as he talks about Moon Patrol in his own words. Kick back and enjoy the wholesome tones of the Brent.
My thoughts on Moon Patrol. Holy cow, what an amazing game. 1982 was a very special year at the arcade that saw tons of innovation taking place, and Moon Patrol was certainly among them. Just from a visual standpoint, the parallax scrolling is tremendous. Something that also doesn't get a lot of dap on Moon Patrol is having enemies manipulate the environment. The enemies that shoot the bullets that create the holes that you would have to then jump is an amazing touch on a game where you never really saw that sort of thing. Yeah, you had your enemies that would chase you and you had your enemies that would shoot at you. All that had been done before. But to have ones that manipulated the environment that you then had to deal with, I think is kind of special for the time period. Um, as for a difficulty, I think a lot of people can pull off a single loop of this game without much problem if they give it a little bit of practice. A lot of it is pattern recognition and knowing that the game is going to put you in situations that are difficult. Um, an example of this is stacking two rocks on top of each other. If you know it's coming, you can slow down for it and either shoot them both or shoot one and jump the other. It's it's a interesting technique for the developers to kind of get a few extra quarters from you because the first time you see it, you honestly are going to die from it. Uh, the game also has a lot of unique elements and unique levels. Uh, in both loops, to be honest. The first loop where you are have to go through the minefield, or you have the different type of spaceships. I think there's three in total that are available to attack, and even the ones that aren't manipulating the environment, the ones that are just dropping your standard bombs, are pretty interesting. The game even goes as far as to have you going up and down in elevation, and something about that section which I don't ever see anyone mention is when you're after you go up the hill, you are so much closer to the bad guys that it gives you a less time to react, and it adds a whole different feel to the combat. Um, there's also the iconic uh, rocket that hangs out behind your Moon Patrol vehicle and waits for you, and you have to jump up in the air and have it go under you and then fall back down and shoot it. That is such just smart enemy design. A new little play on the element that is just so perfect and what makes Moon Patrol so memorable. The second loop of this game does add some new elements. Uh, some of the pits will have plant monster things that you can either shoot or jump over while you're also jumping over the pit. Although it does make the jump much more difficult. It has to be pretty spot on for you to get over it. Um, all in all, though, this is fun as a point press game where you can just really go after the enemies. You know, if you kill all the enemies, you get those bonus points, and really push the time element, trying to get through as quickly as possible. And it's also a fun uh, uh, get through the levels games. When you loop this once, you're still itching for more. And if you were able to loop this twice, which is very difficult but very also doable, it's a fun adventure. And then, really, after that second loop, you feel satisfied and you're ready to move on to a different game. But you have fun the entire time, and that's really something that is unique on Moon Patrol. That it has 26 sectors twice, and it still stays fun and relevant the entire time. I'm sure everyone has played Moon Patrol in some variety. It was ported to a billion different systems. But if you have not played the arcade version, it's worth loading up. It is a different experience to other ports that are out there.
All right, thank you, Brent. Just to stay with my usual tactics, you are dumb and your take was wrong. Now, with all that said, I did have a look to see what these Moon Patrol machines are going for. So here's a fun fact: I owned a Moon Patrol back in the day, and unfortunately, I never got it running properly. It was part of a deal that I had. That when I bought when I got into games early on, I'm a complete maniac. I just bought big lots of games. I think you can talk to Jack Flack about this, and if you ever read his book on collecting arcade machines, that is very accurate. And so I never had this thing for all that long, and someone had painted over the sides. The sides on this game are stenciled, and they're quite nice. Uh, uh, I love the way it looks. They did a really good job on it. But a lot of people painted over these, and these got reused a lot. So I saw someone on eBay selling a non stenciled generic cabinet that didn't have the correct control panel in it and it sold on eBay for $650, which is not, I couldn't believe that. And the PCBs are going for around $250. If you can believe it. So this is not a cheap game. Of course, this is well before the JAMA standard. So this is going to be unique to IREM, cabling. But I agree with Brent. If this is one that you haven't played in the arcade, you should absolutely give this one a whirl. So, in between games here, I want to take a quick moment. Of course, we couldn't really get any reviews of these games because the question was, what games could you beat on one quarter? So I asked around, and we got a couple responses from Bajako and Soup. Amongst the games they mentioned, and again, our definition is you can go through the entire game one time on a quarter. Bajako mentioned Donkey Kong, Bob Jack on the Specky, Chucky Egg, which is a great game, Frogger, Phoenix, Star Wars, the Vector arcade game, Mikey, which is quite a game, Mr. Do. I don't know where he was doing Mr. Do. I've never done that. And Track and Field, another one that's pretty good. So well done, Bajako. And he also mentioned that he can do Donut Dodo, which is a newer game. Soup mentioned a few. Bomb Jack and Renegade on the CPC. King of Dragons. The King. Oh, I see. The King on Dragon 32, which is the Donkey Kong clone. Virtual Fighter on the Saturn. Very good. It's funny that's the first real fighting game mentioned amongst these. So some good stuff there. Thank you, fellas, for sending those in. So when it was my turn to look at a game, I'll be honest with you. I had real trouble with this because some of the games that I can do well on are fighting games, and we've covered a good chunk of the fighting games I can go through on a quarter, and a lot of the other games I can do we've already covered, and so I was like, I could do this one game, but I think we've already covered it. It turned out we hadn't. I was stunned, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the game I chose came out in the exciting year of 1985. So I looked at some stuff that came out that year. Now, 85, of course, it's a more modern, closer to where we're at now. But you're only talking 3 years difference from 82, and so you would think there'd be not a huge leap in technology. I mean, I think it was a pretty decent year for gaming. Of course, you had games that were slowly coming into their own, but I would call this, compared to the 83, 82, 83, 84, I would consider this sort of a down year, if I'm honest. But what you got in the arcade were Choplifter, if you recall the Sega version of that, which played nicely. And one of Boat's favorites, City Connection. It's not a game I like. A lot of people love Commando, which came out that year. Again, I like that game, but I'm not good at it. That's for sure. If you're into Gauntlet, it came out in '85. I will say Gauntlet was a game that really attracted me until I played it, and I just didn't like the gameplay on it that much. And that one absolutely was a quarter muncher. You could spend a ton of cash on it, and I didn't like the fact that you were perpetually dying. It really bugged me, and that turned me off. To be honest with you, Gauntlet's never a game I really was snugged up with. I mean, I like the concept of it. Other offerings, including Gradius and Green Beret from Konami, those are both good games. You had your Hang On. I saw that game in the arcade. I was very impressed with it, but I also was no good at it. But I thought it was a pretty good game. Excuse me. You also had John Elway's Team Quarterback. I love the John Elway games because I know if you're not into American pro football, they're nothing, but they had this little flipper controller to pass the ball with, and it really hasn't been duplicated since those games. There were some baseball games with it as well, and I always thought that was a really cool thing to have in there. I'm looking down the list of the heavy hitters from this. I mean, it's a lot of not that good stuff. I mean, this was not the best year for arcade games. I mean, I look down through here. I mean, I could like stuff like Ring King, or Road Runner. Like these weren't that good of games. I didn't think Road Runner was very good. I didn't think Ring King as a box game was very good. Now you did have Road Blasters that came out, but this is not the Road Blasters. It was just Road Blaster, not the good one. Stuff like Rush and Attack, sort of popular, but it's not amongst my favorites. I never liked it because I was never really good at it. I mean, a lot of bad sequels in here. Son of Phoenix, Dig Dug 2. Duds is what these were. They were no good. I'm sure I'm going to get caught out on something. It's like, here's another one, Super Punch-Out. I mean, was it as good as the first Punch-Out? No, I didn't think so. I just didn't think it was that good. A sequel to 10-Yard Fight. Like, I didn't know that even existed. So, clearly, it didn't do too well. There's a lot of, really, there's one game in here at the end that I'll throw in because I think it was a pretty fun game. That's Yar Kung Fu, which is, I thought it was a really fun, different sort of martial arts game that gave you a lot of different action, a lot of extra bad guys in it, which was cool. But I would say that was not the best year for video games. I'm gonna bury 1985, but there was one awesome game that came out that year. It's a game I'm going to be talking about this week. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying the reason I thought we'd done this before, and if you'll recall, we've used this as a fill-in show a few times. Before I'd even met Boat, me and Brent did a podcast together. I don't know how we even released it. I don't know how it went out, but it was called Classical Gas. It was basically, it wasn't about classical music. It was the gimmick was going to be every week I would find another version of Classical Gas to use as the intro, and then we would talk about one video game. And we only did I think 3 episodes of this. I know we did Dragon's Lair was one of the episodes we did, and I don't recall what the other one was, but the other one we did was on the game I picked this week, which was in fact Mania. If you had to pick my all-time favorite games, Mania would be near the top of the list, which is why I'm so good at it. Mania was called Exciting Hour, the Pro Wrestling Network in Japan. It's native Japan. It was developed over there by Technos Japan and published over here by Taito or Taito, depending on who you are. Or, it's funny, at some places this was published by Atari, but I guess I think that what they mean is the not-so-good console version, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's funny, you'll be surprised how successful this game was, especially when you look at where it was ported. It only really had one true classic home port, which was to the 68,000. The X68000 had a tremendous port of Exciting Hour. And then, of course, you'll hear about the Atari 7800 port of Mania, which is just the dirt worst. No good. And I was surprised to find out that this has recently been ported to the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch. That amused me. This did come out in 1985. It's 1 to 2 player, but it's hot seat on the original. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's step back to 1983. In 1983, a game came out that was called Tag Team Wrestling. It was also by Technos Japan, but it was published by Data East. And it had you taking on a tag team over and over and over. And the tag team, it was an interesting game because when you attacked your opponent, you would start hitting your buttons and it would flip through moves. You would try to flip through the moves and hit a move that would work. And your opponent would flip through his moves. And then you would sort of both do a move. And through some magic, arithmetic magic, it would determine who was going to win. And this game proved to be quite popular. It got a lot of ports, including ports to the NES. I remember playing this one at our local amusement park, Camden Park. I'd pay all that money to get into Camden Park and then spend 2 hours playing tag team wrestling off my buddy Hose. And so, but I did play that one quite a bit, and it got ported to, like, I know there's a C64 version. It's probably a lot of home ports, but it did so well. And so they decided, well, let's go ahead and release a sort of a spiritual successor to this, and that game was Mania. So Mania is very cleverly presented as a wrestling broadcast. It starts out with Corey, your announcer. He's at a desk, and he's explaining the next match, and it's he points and freaks out, and it's always your player, Dynamite Tommy, against an opponent. And there are a variety of opponents, and we'll get to the opponents. So you're the you in this game, and you find out eventually in the sequel that your guy is named Dynamite Tommy. You are wrestling your way to the world title. You are in a large ring. The ring will go actually over the screen will scroll with the ring. This is a vertical game. But it gives you a lot of real estate because you get to see the whole ring and the outside of the ring. And when you get in the ring and face your enemy, it's you, your enemy, and a referee. This is a joystick game with 2 buttons. And I will say, this proves to you, like, having 2 buttons gives you so many more options than just having the 1 button, like we've suffered through in so many of the home machines. Because in this game, you've simply got a punch and a kick button. But combinations of those in grapples do so many moves. For example, if you grapple an opponent and hit up and your punch button, you'll do a body slam. If you hit down and you hit your kick button, you'll do a pile driver. You can also grab your opponent. If you grab your opponent and hit the kick button, you'll throw him off the ropes, and he'll jump off just like, wrestling physics. He'll run off the ropes, he'll rebound, and then you can do other things. You can run at him with a clothesline. You can run at him and get him with a back elbow or a shoulder block, or you could even backdrop him over the top rope if you want, or anywhere. And occasionally he'll stop, just like in real wrestling, it's kick you in the face. So they squeezed a lot into the controls on this. And so once you master the basics, you can get the more advanced stuff. If you hit both your butts at the same time, your guy will just take off running. And then you can perform maneuvers once you're running that you can't do from standing still, including a cross-body block and a shoulder block. So you've got a lot of options here. And so the game goes through, and you will take on, several bad guy wrestlers that you have to go through to get the title. You always start, this is always in the same order until you win the belt. The first guy you're going to wrestle is the Insane Warrior. Although and it's funny, in the Japanese version, a lot of the stuff's misspelled. And then in the Japanese version, he's called the Insane Warrior, which I love that. This is your classic, like, Road Warrior. Like, he's sort of a combination of Road Warrior Hawk and Road Warrior Animal. He's got the mohawk and the leather pants. He does power moves like press slams, clotheslines, stuff like that. He's easily dispatched. I heard a lot of people talk about how easy this game is to get to a certain guy. When I first started playing this, I died. I got beat by every guy on my way up. I mean, the next guy beat me over and over and over, but you learn. So once you get past the Insane Warrior, you've got the Karate Fighter. Karate Fighter is a guy who's absolutely modeled after a guy named the Great Kabuki. I grew up watching Kabuki. He was awesome. One of my favorite wrestlers. I wish they'd put. He did a bit in back in the day where he would shoot a green mist out of his mouth. A lot of wrestlers copied it, including like the Great Muta and a bunch of other guys have done it. Like usually Asian wrestlers. It's a popular favorite amongst the Asian wrestlers to do the old spit the stuff in the eye routine. But Kabuki's the first guy I ever saw do it. Kabuki also used to bring nunchucks to the ring, and so does a Karate Fighter, but he didn't use them. Karate Fighter is known for his big super, like, flying kick to the head. He also does this, like, a rapid-fire chop routine, and he can also drop a chop on you if you're down. Pretty cool guy. I always liked him. The next guy is probably certainly your toughest guy in the game. It's Coco Savage. Coco Savage is he's a guy in sort of like I guess they're going for like an African savage routine. He's got a single on with the single strap, sort of like a leopard print outfit. And he's a African American guy, but again, I don't know where he's from. He is a tough guy to deal with. He's got a lot of cool moves. One of the things he can do if you're laying there, he'll just walk up and grab your feet and just spin around and whip you across the ring, which is it's always good for a laugh when he does that. He gets you in a headlock and just punches you in the head, rabbit punch. He does like a swan dive, which is quite nice. But his main maneuver that you've got to watch out for. In fact, Coco Savage inadvertently teaches you how to never lose at this game, because the move that he does to you over and over and over cheaply is the shoulder block. And once you realize that you can do the exact same move and use it the exact same way, this game becomes much, much easier, because you can effectively use that to win every match instantly. He's a lot of fun. Now, it's funny, a lot of people credit Coco Savage as being based on Bobo Brazil. I got a problem with this. Because if one website says it, then everyone copies it. If you know anything about Bobo Brazil, and I went back and looked at his history just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. As far as I know, Bobo Brazil never wrestled as as an African savage type wrestler. He was in fact, he was a real groundbreaking wrestler in terms of equal rights. This guy was headlining shows all over all over the world, in Japan, but he couldn't eat at the same restaurants as the rest of the wrestlers. He couldn't stay at the same hotels. He was involved in the first interracial tag match in the history of Atlanta. A lot of people don't know that. So when you say Coco Savage is actually Bobo Brazil, not really. I mean, Bobo did wear an outfit like this sort of, but he didn't wrestle like this guy, and he wasn't some kind of crazy savage. Now, he was one of the trainers of a guy named Kamala, the Ugandan giant, who also didn't wrestle like this guy, but he was a Ugandan, like, savage, like a man-eater type. Another great gimmick from, that we'll never see that one again. So I would sort of like say this guy sort of looks like Coco Savage, or sort of looks like Bobo Brazil, but sort of has a little bit of Kamala mixed in. But saying this guy's exactly like Bobo Brazil, I think, is idiotic. I don't know where they got that. Speaking of idiotic, let's talk about the Piranha. He's the next guy you're going to face. The Piranha's a masked wrestler. Here's another one. One guy says it, and I see it pop up everywhere. They're saying that the Piranha is based on Mil Mascaras. That's crap. I'm not buying it. Because Mil Mascaras, if you know who Mil Mascaras is, Man of a Million Masks, a Mexican legend, and a guy who was never healed pretty much his entire career. And he certainly wasn't a rudo or rule breaker. He would never do the stuff that Piranha does in this game. Piranha is the cheapest guy in the game in terms of his horrible maneuvers. He pokes you in the eye. He chokes you. He does all kinds of horrible stuff. And he is nothing, aside from the fact that he wears a mask, he's nothing like Mil Mascaras. He is a lot of fun. He also does a claw hold. He can also do the backdrop. So if you run at him, he can backdrop you out of the ring. He's the only guy that can do that. Yeah, he can be tough to deal with. But again, saying he's like Mil Mascaras is idiotic, because he's not. Once you beat all the other wrestlers, it's time for you to ascend to take on the final champion, and it's Golden Hulk. Now, in the original version of this, the Japanese version, Exciting Hour, this final character is called Blues Bloody. Blues Bloody is an exact ripoff of a famous American wrestler called Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody was a huge star in Japan. If you want to ever have a good laugh, just go look up Bruiser Brody Japan entrance. He'll come in to like a Zeppelin song or something, and then like he'll just run through the crowd swinging a chain, and the people run like Godzilla has just shown up. I mean, it's insane. I think you could never have an entrance like this now. And he was big, and his main maneuvers were the kicks to the head, punches. He did a leg drop, he did a knee drop, and that's what the character in this game does. However, when this came to America, they wisely chose to change this guy's name to Golden Hulk, do a little palate sweetening, and he again Hulk does the leg drop. And contrary to popular belief, I have seen Hulk do a drop kick or two in his days, but not so much. But he does a lot of the same stuff Hulk does, and he can be a tough customer. He does a one arm body slam throw. He'll throw you right out of the ring, which is fun. I should mention some of the details in the game that make it a little more fun than your average wrestling game. You can get backdropped or thrown out of the ring, or you can throw your opponent out of the ring. And when you go out there, you can smack him around outside the ring, swing him into the guardrail, swing him into the ring. The problem arises about getting counted out. You can if the referee counts 20, you're gone, and then you lose. You can also, what is fun is you can just get your opponent counted out, and that's one of the things I like to do just as a challenge to myself, is just try to get my opponent counted out. Something else that I love to do is throw my opponent or backdrop him out of the ring, take a run, do the cross body block, and your guy will fly over the top rope and land on your opponent, a big plancha, which was, I mean, that was great when you were a kid. You could also climb to the top rope. The upper two turnbuckles on either side of the ring would allow you to go to the top rope. And when you're up there, you can do like a flipping dive type thing, or a big like a it's hard to explain what it is. It's just he just basically does a front roll and lands on them, and then or you can do a big knee drop. And so you can do, my favorite sequence would be kill the guy until he's beat down, and then once he's kind of hazy, I would throw him in the ropes, drop kick him, and then or spin kick him, throw him in the ropes, clothesline him, go to the top rope with a couple of knee drops, then a third, you can do that flip, and then I would run off the ropes, jump, and then do the cross body block and hit him while he's laying down. That's something this game gave you, was a lot of ability to be creative in your attacks. We tried everything. We'd throw the guy off the rope and jump to the top rope real quick and try to like hit him with stuff. There was a lot of room to have a good time with this game. One of the things that was fun in this game, aside from the game itself, was the fact that they put a bunch of crazy stuff in the crowd. This game is sort of famous for that. A lot of people speculate this is because in '85 WrestleMania was coming around. They had a lot of celebrities in it, but I mean, this game would have been in development before that. So it does make you wonder if they just didn't feel like putting some wacky stuff in the crowd. And most games don't go into the crowd element like this one does. Amongst the people in the crowd, you're going to see Darth Vader and Princess Leia, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, one of the guys from Alien, Popeye, ZZ Top, Batman and Robin, John Travolta, Stevie Wonder, and my Superman, and my favorite, the Jackson 5, all represented in the crowd, which I always thought was highly amusing. So get this. In terms of popularity, I didn't know this until I did this. Exciting Hour in Japan was the highest grossing table arcade unit of October 1985, and in the United States, Mania was the highest grossing arcade conversion kit of 1986 and the third highest grossing overall game. So ponder that for a minute, if you will. This game was huge in America in '86. Now, granted, arcades were sort of tipping over by then, but they were still moving strong. So this game made a ton of money. You would wonder why it didn't get more action in the home ports. It's baffling to me. It was even, I remember playing Arkanoid on the Coco, and it would be an arcade, and it would sort of show a bunch of games, and Arkanoid would be in the middle of it. And these are presumably games that were going to get ported to the home computers, and Mania was one of them. But all the other games that were in there got ported, and Mania never did. It was disappointing. I mentioned that Atari did, in fact, release a Mania challenge in '90 for the beleaguered and too late to the party Atari 7800. As much as I love it, it's the game sucked. It sucked bad. I don't recommend it. There was a port planned allegedly for the 8 bits, but there you go. Never came out. There was a sequel to this game called Mania Challenge, which was no good. We were excited when it came out because you could fight your buddy. It was 2-player. But they got rid of most of the cast of bad guys. They added nothing new except for one wrestler that you could play when you're playing 2 players, which is he was exactly like Dynamite Tommy. And it was a real letdown. I mean, me and my buddies were real excited when this came out, but it was a dud, a big old dud. And so, what are you going to do? And so we didn't play it. And, of course, it got no traction. So they killed the series dead in that particular version of this game. So this was my choice, but I haven't heard what the Brent's got to say about it. So let's check out the Brent's views on this particular game, Mania. Take it away, the Brent.
So I want to take a moment and give my opinion on Mania. This was a game, early 80s, obviously, that really understood what was important about a wrestling game. You had your character, your average looking guy compared to the rest of the roster, and you had a lot of playful elements in both the crowd. Even the referee has his own style with a nice bald head that runs over and jumps on the mat and counts out those big long 1, 2, 3s. Uh, it was a bit of an odd choice to not give you any customization on your fighter. I mean, there were plenty of wrestling games before this that would let you choose who you wanted to wrestle as, but they did that, in my opinion, to have a very focused and controlled environment for how you were supposed to play the game. Um, it is a solvable wrestling game. Uh, Once you realize how many moves you can do, for example, let's consider if it had a point system. Things like uh, backdrops and clotheslines and shoulder blocks are like a point 0.5. You can almost always do these to your opponent. Things like body slams, um, the jumping cross body blocks are like a 1. And then things like pile drivers and suplexes are like a 2. And you can spend so many points while you have control of the match before it swaps to your opponent. Now, there are ways around that, which is what makes this game go so you can basically go infinite. And it mostly involves the shoulder block. But having that as an element, uh, if you want to solve the game, you can figure it out. The opponents in Mania are fantastic. Most of them playing off of who were very popular at the time when the game released. Um, I would say personally, Coco Savage is the actual champion. He's the guy that your third fighter. That if you can learn how to manipulate him, you can go very far in the game. Uh, Aaron solved this while it was still in the arcade, which is amazing and something that really needs to be commended to be able to put forth such an effort. I did learn this on my own. I might have watched Aaron and kind of got the gist of what needed to be done to loop this game continuously. And it's not necessarily difficult. It does get repetitive, especially when you're on your, you know, eighth or ninth loop, and the loops aren't. You could get anyone, any fighter in your loop before you have to fight Golden Hawk again. But it is a tremendously fun game. If you've never played Mania, you owe it to yourself to really get out there and give it a shot.
Man, I can't believe it. Brent put me over. And, and that. Thank you to Brent. You know, I did play this. I'm sure I've mentioned this a few times, and I played this a lot with my buddy Hose. Me and Hose are both. I mean, we've been best friends forever, and we're both big wrestling fans. So this game, when we saw this arrive, I think the first time I saw this was at the Chuck E. Cheese or the Showbiz, whatever it was back in the day, in Barbersville. And then eventually it made its way over to the gold mines over in the Huntington Mall arcades. We were hooked. I mean, we were infatuated with this game, but we both were awesome at it. Eventually, we got so good that we would leave each other messages in the high score table, which means we would purposely lose just to make sure we could complete the message. And we've both done it many times. You can put little messages in the high, because you could leave you could have more than 3 characters in the high score table. So we'd leave a little messages, and of course, then you got to get that message out of there. And every once in a while, he'd put the bad mouth on me in the high score table, so I'm feeding this thing quarters just to erase that off there. What a bum. But this game, near and dear to my heart. This is one of the first games I ever bought. Of course, I bought the board. Like I said, this was the big conversion. So most of what you're going to find in this are conversions. We own the PCB to this day. In fact, we got a JAMA converter for this one because it wasn't JAMA compatible, so we got a converter to convert it to JAMA. I bought it off a guy. It's all handmade. It's all hot glued and stuff from back in the day. And I remember putting this in one of my arcade machines, and the arcade machine had a horizontal monitor, so we had to play this thing sideways and rewire the joysticks. We were so stupid. But we just wanted to play it, So I have fond memories of this, and it is one of the boards we still own. I looked this up on eBay just to see what it was going for. And this thing was going for a guaranteed working PCB for this game will go anywhere between $150 and $200. Even the marquees are going for $30. I saw people selling the marquees and the boards, but the bezels and the complete machines are not showing up for the party. So I'm guessing at this point, a lot of people have gotten hold of these and have kept them. I think we've got a bezel. I'm not 100% sure. I know I've got a marquee in there for it. But this is a great game. It's like Brent mentioned, once you understand the shoulder block technique, I mean, you can cheese ball this game. This is one of those games where I realized I could never be the kind of guy that goes for world records because I would just get bored playing it. And it does get repetitive after a while. Even though it's one of my favorite games, it would just get boring and repetitive. And so I would just eventually just quit. Usually I would just try to keep doing the stupidest things I could. Like, I want to get the guy counted out on the last possible number. Stuff like that. And then eventually lose. So, a great game that I've always enjoyed. And one that I will absolutely recommend to anyone, whether you're into wrestling or not. It's a lot of fun. And it's a fast-paced game. It's not, once you learn the secret, you can crush it. But before that, you can have a pretty good time with it. That's for sure. You know what else have a pretty good time with, everybody? It's the wheel. Let's fire this sucker up. Boy, I get to do the honors this week. Very rare appearance for me. So let's talk about what's on the wheel this week. This week we have added Game & Watch games as the retro piece. And as the new piece, we've added better on CRT TV games. So presumably these are games that people think are better on CRTs than on non-CRTs. Let's see if we can give this thing a whirl, everybody. Okay, let's see. We got a winner here, folks. And it is Soviet arcade games. Soviet arcade games from Lobsterminator. So you may be asking yourself, well, how are we going to do this with the BRENT not in the game? So what I'm going to do in the intro is I'm just going to select a game. We're going to do one game on ARG until we get Brent back in. Because I don't like to pick 2 games since Brent's not here picking. And then if Brent manages to get back in time to do some of these, then we'll stick him back in. I will say, as we get to the end here, I pondered what to do with these shows while Brent was away. And I feel okay about taking care of the rest of the rotation, the Atari ST and the ZX and the Coco. I love those machines, and they'll be a lot of fun. But ARG is the hard one because me and Brent have done this for so long. I mean, me and Boat started off, but we only did about 12 episodes. The rest of them have been Brent. And I will say Boat and Jack Flack, a few others have volunteered to step in. but it's just the logistics of it and the time differences and stuff. It's just going to be tough. That's why I decided to go ahead and just do them on my own. But I will say, when you get old, you become quite a softy. Unfortunately, it's true. And the thought of doing these shows without Brent, some people, I've gotten a few notes over the years where I'm too hard on the Brent, giving the guy the business. I love that guy. He's my brother. I love that guy. And he's going through some big changes with his surroundings and whatnot. And when I was putting this show together, and I'm not gonna lie, it's true that as I laid in the opening, I shed a tear just watching it, knowing that I was gonna be doing this for a few weeks without the Brent. But I'm gonna do it. He wants me to do it. I'm gonna keep the ball rolling, and we're gonna have a good time. But I don't want anyone to think that we're shoving Brent out the door. On the contrary, I need that guy back quickly and as soon as possible. So everyone, send out the positive vibes to the Brent, and I'm sure he would appreciate it, and I'd appreciate it as well. Next week, we'll be on the rotation, and we're trying to get caught back up. This is going to be a special week. Halloween's coming up, ladies and gentlemen. And so we're going to be looking at, on our Sinclair, a couple of real interesting games. My buddy Happy Coding, he works for an outfit called the Midnight Brew, and they're going to have out a sort of a ZX Spectrum horror pack, and it's comprised of 2 games. And when I saw these demonstrated on International Computer Club about a month ago, I was like, I got to play them. I got to. So he sent me a review copy over, and so next week we're going to be looking at the remixed versions of Frankenstein and Dr. Acula. We'll be talking about the exciting box opportunity that they've got that they're selling. I think these are, having seen Frankenstein, I'm excited to play it. I've not really even had a look at Dr. Acula, so I'm excited to play that one as well. So I'm going to do a couple for our Sinclair. That'll be coming out probably sometime 3 or 4 days after this particular show comes out. And then, of course, next time around ARG, yes, it will be Soviet games. I've got no idea how we're going to do that one. So I hope everyone has a good week, and we will catch you next time around on ARG Presents. Be seeing you.
We got it going. With a spin of the wheel, we'll uncover our fate and stream it to you all in one take. We tend to be loud and we fight quite a bit, but it's an unscripted show, so you get what you get. If we stopped it right now and we just walked away, we'd be back next week, 'cause we just can't wait to play.